They say if you leave out leather and thread, the elves will come at night and make you shoes. David's grandfather used to tell him that story before he went completely insane, before they found him in the workshop at 3 a.m., trying to saw off his own feet with a rusty blade, screaming about paying the debt and giving them what they're owed. Grandpa died in the psychiatric ward 3 weeks later. The doctors said it was a psychotic break, but David found the journal, found the drawings, found the photos of customers who'd bought shoes from the shop, and then vanished without a trace. 17 people over 40 years, all wearing Grandpa's shoes in their last known photographs. The shop was cursed, everyone said, haunted. David should have burned it down and walked away, but he was broke, desperate, and the journal had instructions, a ritual, a way to summon something that would save him from losing everything. The elves, Grandpa called them, but the drawings in the journal didn't look like the cute fairy tale creatures from children's books. They looked like something that crawled up from a place where light doesn't reach, something with too many fingers and teeth in wrong places and eyes that had seen humans suffering for centuries and learned to enjoy it. David was desperate enough not to care. He followed the ritual, left out leather and tools, went to sleep, woke up to 12 pairs of shoes, so perfect they looked alien, stitching too precise, leather too smooth, constructed in ways that shouldn't be physically possible. He sold them for $10,000 each, didn't leave any payment. The journal said to leave food, gold, something valuable. But David figured fairy tales were just stories, superstitions from a crazy old man. That was 3 weeks ago. Now David can hear them in the walls, scratching, laughing, working. And last night, he found a pair of shoes on his workbench that he didn't remember ordering. Beautiful, exquisite, made from leather he didn't recognize. This morning, his neighbor, the one who'd been complaining about noise from David's workshop, didn't show up for work. Police found his apartment empty. No signs of struggle, just his clothes in a pile, and a smell like a tannery in the air. And David realized, with horror crawling up his spine, that the leather on those new shoes was tattooed. His neighbor had a sleeve tattoo on his left arm. The elves don't just make shoes, they collect payment. And when you don't give them what they're owed, they take it themselves. One piece at a time, one person at a time, until everyone you've ever known has been turned into inventory. Subscribe and comment what childhood fairy tale actually terrifies you, or the dark story you want us to cover next. David found the journal 3 days after the funeral, hidden in a false bottom drawer in Grandpa's workbench. The leather cover was stained with something that looked like blood, but smelled worse, like meat left out in the sun, like the tannery on the edge of town where nobody went anymore. The first page had a warning written in Grandpa's shaking handwriting. Do not read further. "Burn this. Burn the shop. Leave this place and never come back." David kept reading. The shop had been in the family for 6 generations. Not because it was successful, because nobody could leave. Each generation of shoemakers had used the ritual, had summoned the elves, had made their bargains, and each generation had paid in different ways. Great-great-grandfather had paid with livestock, sheep, cows, horses left in the workshop overnight, gone by morning. No blood, no bones, just empty space and the smell of a slaughterhouse. Great-grandfather had paid with gold and silver, melted down, and left in offering bowls that were always empty by dawn. Grandfather had paid with his own blood at first. Small cuts, careful measurements, enough to satisfy, but not enough to kill. Until he got old and couldn't afford to give blood anymore. Until his hands shook too much to work, and the debts piled up faster than he could make shoes. That's when the elves started choosing their own payment. The journal had a list, 17 names over the last decade of Grandpa's life. 17 customers who'd bought shoes and then vanished. David recognized some of them, missing person cases that had gone cold. People who'd walked out of their houses wearing new shoes and never came back. And at the bottom of the list, in handwriting that barely looked human anymore, Grandpa had written, "They're not elves. They're harvesters. They collect skin. They've been collecting for 200 years. Every shoemaker thinks they can outsmart the deal. Every shoemaker ends up feeding them." David should have burned the journal, should have walked away from the shop, from the debts, from all of it. But the next page had instructions. A ritual, step-by-step directions for summoning the elves, and a note. If you're desperate enough to be reading this, you're desperate enough to use it. Just remember, never take without giving. Never skip payment, and never let them see you watching them work. David was 3 months behind on rent. The bank was foreclosing. His girlfriend, Melissa, was talking about leaving because she couldn't watch him self-destruct anymore. He had $200 in his account and no prospects. He was desperate enough. The ritual was specific. Had to be done at midnight on a full moon. Premium leather laid out on the workbench. Not the cheap stuff David usually used, but real leather, expensive. The kind that cost more than he could afford. Tools arranged in a pattern that looked almost like a summoning circle. Thread silk, hand-spun, dyed with something Grandpa's notes called nightshade extract that David had to special order from a weird occult shop online. And then the words, whispered 3 times at exactly midnight. Makers of wonder, crafters of need, I offer materials, you offer your deed. Take what I give what I lack, work through the night, I'll not look back. David felt stupid saying it, felt like he was playing pretend, like this was some elaborate joke his dying grandfather had written to mess with whoever inherited the shop. But he said the words anyway, left the leather tools arranged exactly as the journal specified, locked the workshop door, went upstairs to the apartment above the shop where he'd been living since Grandpa died, and he went to sleep. At 3 a.m., he woke up to sounds coming from downstairs. Not breaking and entering sounds, not burglary sounds, work sounds, hammering, cutting, the rhythmic thump of tools against leather. David lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, telling himself it was pipes. Old building noises, his imagination, but the sounds continued, precise, methodical, too coordinated to be random, too purposeful to be nothing. He didn't go downstairs. Grandpa's final rule: never watch them work. When his alarm went off at 7 a.m., David got up and went downstairs with his heart hammering against his ribs. The workshop door was still locked. He opened it with shaking hands. 12 pairs of shoes sat on his workbench. Not good shoes, not great shoes, perfect shoes. The kind of craftsmanship David had only seen in museums, in historical exhibits about master artisans from centuries ago. The stitching was so precise, it looked like it had been done by machine. But no machine could do stitching like this. It curved and flowed like calligraphy, like art. The leather was worked in ways David didn't understand. Textured and smooth in patterns that shouldn't be possible with the tools he'd left out. The soles were constructed using techniques he'd never seen, joints and seams that were almost invisible. He picked up one pair. They were light, impossibly light, but solid, real, worth thousands, maybe tens of thousands. David took photos, posted them on Instagram with a caption about returning to traditional craftsmanship and handmade artisan shoes. Within 2 hours, he had 50 messages from people wanting to buy them. He sold all 12 pairs by the end of the day. $10,000 each. $120,000 total. More money than David had made in the last 3 years combined. The journal said to leave payment. Food, gold, something valuable, an offering of gratitude. But David had bills to pay, debts to clear, a life to salvage. He didn't leave anything. David used the ritual 5 more times over the next 3 weeks. Each time, he woke up to perfect shoes. Each time, he sold them for obscene amounts of money. Each time, he didn't leave payment. By week 3, he'd made almost $1 million. Paid off the shop, paid off his debts, bought Melissa a ring, started planning their future. He'd convinced himself the journal was just Grandpa's paranoia, that the shoes were some kind of sleepwalking thing, his own subconscious mind producing incredible work while he was in a fugue state, that the ritual was just a psychological trigger that unlocked some hidden talent he'd always had. The human brain is incredible at rationalizing things it doesn't want to believe. On the night of the 6th ritual, David didn't go upstairs. He wanted to see himself work, wanted to understand how his mind was producing these shoes. So he hid in the supply closet at the back of the workshop, left the door cracked, and waited. Midnight came. The workshop stayed quiet. Then, at 12:03 a.m., the temperature dropped. Not gradually, instantly, like someone had opened a freezer. David's breath fogged in the air. Frost started forming on the windows, and they came, not through the door, not through the windows. They just appeared, materializing out of shadows that shouldn't have been deep enough to hide anything. 7 of them. David had expected small fairy tale creatures. Cute, maybe a little mischievous. The elves from children's books. These weren't those. They were roughly child-sized, but that's where the similarity to anything human ended. Their bodies were wrong, too thin, like they'd been stretched, joints bending in places that shouldn't have joints. Their skin looked stitched together from different sources, patches of different colors and textures held together with thread that glowed faintly in the darkness. Their hands were the worst. Fingers too long, too many joints. Nails that curved into points like surgical blades. And their faces, almost human, but with too many teeth when they smiled. Eyes that didn't blink. Expressions that flickered between childlike wonder and predatory hunger. One of them sniffed the air and turned directly toward the closet where David was hiding. "He's watching," it said in a voice like grinding bones. "6 debts unpaid," another one said, running its blade fingers over the leather David had left out. 6 offerings taken without payment given. "The rules were clear," a third one said. It was examining the tools, touching them with something like affection. "Take without giving, and we take what's owed." The first one, the leader, David somehow knew smiled with far too many teeth. "We've already started the collection." The complainer next door, the one who said our work was too loud. "We visited him last night." David felt ice water in his veins. His neighbor, Marcus, the guy who'd been banging on the walls at 3 a.m., yelling about noise violations. David hadn't seen him in 2 days. "Where is he?" David whispered, forgetting to stay silent. All 7 elves turned to look at the closet. Their eyes glowed in the darkness. "Come out," the leader said. "Look at what we made." David wanted to stay hidden, wanted to pretend this wasn't happening. But his body moved on its own, the closet door opening, his feet carrying him forward, even as his mind screamed at him to run. The elves had been working while he was frozen in terror. On the workbench sat a pair of shoes that David hadn't left materials for. They were exquisite, masterwork quality. The leather had a texture David didn't recognize, smooth, but with a pattern to it, almost like scales or feathers, but not quite. One of the elves picked up the shoe and held it toward David. "Quality materials," it said. "Fresh, young, excellent texture." That's when David saw the tattoo, barely visible in the leather, distorted by the stretching and treatment, but unmistakable. a dragon coiled around what used to be Marcus's left forearm. David's stomach heaved. He stumbled backward, hitting the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor. Human leather is superior, the leader explained, almost conversationally. Cattle hide is too thick, pig skin too coarse. But human skin, properly treated, properly stretched, it creates shoes that last centuries. Your grandfather knew this. Why do you think his shoes were so legendary? No, David whispered. No, he wouldn't. He had no choice. The leader crouched down to David's level. Its face was inches away, and David could smell rot and chemicals and something sweet like decay. Once you use the ritual, once you summon us, you're bound. You can pay with offerings, gold, blood, animals, or you cannot pay, and we take payment ourselves. 6 debts, another elf said, and they all started chanting it, voices overlapping. 6 debts, 6 skins, 6 people close to the debtor. The leader tilted its head. Your neighbor was 1. We need 5 more. We'll take them from your life, one by one, until the debt is paid. Its smile widened impossibly. Unless you'd like to choose. Make it easier for everyone. I'm not choosing anyone, David said, his voice breaking. Then we choose. The leader stood, looking up at the ceiling toward the apartment above, where Melissa was sleeping. The girlfriend is close, literally close. She'll do nicely for the second payment. David scrambled to his feet. No, you can't. Take me instead. The elves laughed. It sounded like breaking glass. You can't pay your own debt, the leader said. The rules are specific. You took without giving. So we take from what you have. 6 pairs of shoes, 6 people you care about. That's justice. That's balance. One of the elves was already moving toward the stairs. David threw himself in front of the stairs, blocking the way. Stop, please. I'll give you anything. Gold, money. I have almost $1 million now. We don't want your money, the leader said. Money is paper. Paper isn't skin. Then what? What do I give you to stop this? The elves looked at each other. Something passed between them, communication David couldn't hear or understand. Then the leader turned back to him. There is one option, it said slowly. A different kind of payment. Your grandfather used it once, near the end. What is it? You work for us, the leader said. Become our hunter, our procurer. Find us materials, people who won't be missed, people on the edges, people society has already forgotten. Bring them to the workshop. Let us work, and in exchange, we'll forgive your debt. Spare the 5 people you love. David felt sick. You want me to be a serial killer. We want you to be practical. The leader's expression was almost sympathetic. Your grandfather did it for 3 years. 17 people. Homeless, addicts, sex workers. People nobody looked for. He saved his family that way. Kept his wife safe, his daughter, his friends. And it drove him insane, David said. Guilt does that to humans. The leader shrugged. But he kept his family alive. was the deal. That was his choice. The elf on the stairs took another step up. David could hear it, the soft padding of inhuman feet on wood. "Choose quickly," the leader said. "Either you hunt for us, or we hunt for you. Either way, we get our 6 skins. Question is whether they come from strangers or from people you love." David thought about Melissa upstairs, about his mom across town, about his best friend, his coworkers, the handful of people who actually mattered in his life, about having to choose which strangers died so they could live, about becoming what his grandfather became, about ending up in a psychiatric ward, trying to saw off his own feet to pay the debt. "How long?" David asked. His voice sounded hollow. "Dead. How long do I have to do this?" 6 people for the current debt," the leader said. "Then 1 person per month after that, for as long as you use the ritual. Or you can stop using the ritual, stop making shoes with our help, and go back to being poor and desperate." It smiled. "But you won't. Nobody ever does. The money's too good. The work's too perfect. Once you've tasted success built on our craftsmanship, you can't go back to your own mediocrity." The elf on the stairs was at the top now. David could hear it outside his apartment door. "Stop," David said. "Stop, I'll do it. I'll hunt for you." The leader raised one long-fingered hand. The elf at the door froze. "Swear it," the leader said. "Swear on your grandfather's grave, on your own blood. Swear you'll bring us 6 people within 6 weeks, 1 per week, and we'll forgive your debt." David closed his eyes, thought about Melissa, thought about his mom, thought about the life he'd just started building, and he thought about Marcus, whose skin was currently stretched on a workbench, whose body was probably in pieces in whatever nightmare dimension these things came from. "I swear," David whispered, "on my grandfather's grave, on my own blood, I'll bring you 6 people." The temperature in the room rose suddenly. The frost on the windows melted. The elf at the top of the stairs giggled a horrible, childlike sound and skipped back down. "Excellent," the leader said. "We'll provide you with tools, methods. Our grandfather taught yours, and we'll teach you. It's easier than you think, hunting humans. They're so trusting, so easy to lure into dark places." The elves gathered their things, the shoes made from Marcus, the tools, the leftover materials. They moved toward the shadows at the back of the workshop, preparing to disappear. "1 week," the leader said, turning back to look at David one final time. "Bring us the first offering in 1 week. We'll know if you try to run. We'll know if you try to warn anyone. And if you fail, we start with the girlfriend." Then they were gone. Just shadows and the smell of a tannery, and David standing in his workshop at 3 a.m., having just agreed to commit murder to save the people he loved. He looked at his hands. They were shaking, covered in frost that was slowly melting. Upstairs, he heard Melissa moving around, probably waking up to use the bathroom. She was alive, safe, because David had just sold his soul to keep her that way. He walked to the workbench where the elves had been working. The shoes made from Marcus were gone, but there were tools left behind. Not regular tools. Things that looked medical, surgical. Blades designed for precision cutting. Restraints. Instructions written in a language David didn't recognize, but somehow understood. And at the bottom, a list. Names and addresses. People the elves had researched for him. Homeless encampments. Addiction clinics. Places where people disappeared all the time and nobody asked questions. David picked up the list with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. 1 week. 6 people over 6 weeks. And then 1 person per month for as long as he wanted to keep his business, keep his money, keep his life. His grandfather had lasted 3 years before going insane. 17 people. And David had just agreed to do the same thing. He looked up at the ceiling, heard Melissa getting back into bed, heard her call out, "David, you coming to bed?" "Yeah," he called back. His voice sounded normal, human, like he wasn't a monster, like he hadn't just agreed to become a serial killer to save her life. "Just finishing up some work. I'll be up in a minute." He looked down at the list in his hands, at the first name, at the address of a homeless shelter 3 blocks away. 1 week. David folded the list and put it in his pocket, turned off the workshop lights, locked the door, and as he climbed the stairs to hold his girlfriend and pretend everything was fine, he could hear them in the walls, the elves, laughing, waiting, hungry. He'd made his choice. Now he had to live with it, or die trying. David brought them 6 people over 6 weeks. The first one was easy. A homeless man named Tommy, who was drunk outside the shelter, who followed David to the workshop when David offered him $50 for moving some boxes. Tommy didn't scream for long. The elves were efficient. The second one was harder. A woman named Lisa, a sex worker working the streets at 2 a.m. She fought, broke 2 of David's ribs, but the elves had given him tools, techniques, ways to make people compliant. It still took 3 hours to get her to the workshop. 3 hours of her begging, promising she wouldn't tell, offering money, offering anything. By the 3rd person, David had stopped feeling it, stopped seeing them as human. Had to, because if he thought about what he was doing, really thought about it, he'd end up like Grandpa, trying to saw off his own feet to escape the guilt. The 4th was a teenager. Runaway. No ID. Nobody looking for him. The elves were particularly pleased with him. Young skin, the leader said, so smooth, so elastic. These will be our finest work yet. By the 6th person, David was numb, mechanical. He picked someone from the list, lured them to the workshop, left them for the elves, and went upstairs to sleep next to Melissa like nothing had happened. The debt was paid. 6 skins for 6 stolen pairs of shoes. Justice. Balance. elves were right about one thing. David couldn't stop. The money was too good. His Instagram had 200,000 followers now. Celebrities were wearing his shoes. Fashion magazines were calling him an artisan genius and a master of forgotten craftsmanship. He had contracts worth millions, a waiting list 3 years long, a reputation that made everything worth it. So he kept using the ritual, kept leaving out materials, kept finding people who wouldn't be missed. 1 person per month, 12 per year. Melissa started asking questions around month 4. Why was he so distant? Why did he smell like chemicals sometimes? Why did he wake up screaming about skin and blades and faces pressed against glass? David told her it was stress, business pressure, success anxiety. She believed him because people believe what's convenient. Because the alternative, that her fiancé was a serial killer working with literal demons, was too insane to consider. His mom visited in month 7, hugged him, told him how proud she was of what he'd built. And David hugged her back with hands that had held restraints, that had dragged unconscious bodies into a workshop, that had touched tools designed for flaying human beings. He proposed to Melissa in month 9. Beautiful ring, expensive restaurant, the whole thing. She said yes, crying, talking about their future, about kids and a house and growing old together. David smiled and kissed her and thought about the teenager he'd brought to the workshop 2 nights ago, about the sounds, about how the elves worked so carefully, so precisely, harvesting skin like it was art. In month 12, he killed his 17th person, the same number Grandpa had reached before going insane. David waited for the guilt to destroy him, waited for the nightmares to become unbearable, waited for his mind to break the way Grandpa's had. But it didn't, because David had discovered something Grandpa never did. If you stop seeing your victims as people, if you choose only those society has already discarded, if you convince yourself you're doing them a favor by ending their suffering, the guilt becomes manageable, almost easy. The elves were pleased. "You're our best hunter in 50 years, the leader told him during month 14. Your grandfather struggled with conscience. You've moved past that, evolved. I'm doing what I have to do, David said, and he believed it, had to believe it, because the alternative was admitting he'd become a monster, not because he had to, but because it was convenient. The shoe shop thrived. David's brand became international. He opened a second location, hired employees, people who worked in the showroom, never in the workshop. That space was his alone. He married Melissa in a ceremony that cost more than most people make in a lifetime. And every month, someone disappeared into his workshop. Every month, the elves crafted masterpieces from human skin. Every month, David told himself he was just doing business. 3 years in, he stopped needing the list the elves provided. He'd learned to spot potential victims on his own, developed instincts for who would be missed and who wouldn't, got better at luring them, at managing the logistics, at cleaning up afterward. 5 years in, he'd taken over 40 people. The guilt was gone entirely now, replaced by a kind of professional detachment. This was his job, his craft, the price of success. 7 years in, Melissa got pregnant. That's when David started to feel it again. The weight, the horror, because he looked at the ultrasound of his daughter, and thought about all the people who'd had mothers, who'd been someone's child, who'd mattered to someone somewhere, even if society had forgotten them. He tried to stop, tried to tell the elves he was done, that he'd paid enough, that he wanted out. The leader smiled with too many teeth. "You can stop anytime," it said. "Just return everything you've built, the money, the reputation, the success. Give it all back, become poor and desperate again. Or keep paying, keep hunting, keep feeding us." "What if I just stop?" David asked. "What if I walk away?" "Then we take payment ourselves," the leader said simply. "Starting with the wife, then the daughter when she's born, then your mother, then everyone you've ever loved. We'll work through your whole life, one person at a time, until you understand that you can't escape debts. You can only service them." David's daughter was born 3 months later. Beautiful, perfect. Melissa named her Claire. And 2 weeks after her birth, David went hunting again. Because that's what you do when you've sold your soul and started a family in the profits. You keep feeding the machine. You keep making the payments. You keep hunting. His grandfather lasted 3 years before going insane. David's been hunting for 8 years now. Nearly 100 people. And he's not insane. He's just practical, realistic, doing what needs to be done. That's what he tells himself when he watches Claire sleep in her crib, when he holds Melissa and lies about where he was tonight, when he sees missing person posters and recognizes faces he personally delivered to the workshop. The elves were right. Once you taste success built on their craftsmanship, you can't go back to mediocrity. Once you cross certain lines, once you learn to live with certain choices, you can't uncross them. You just keep walking forward, keep hunting, keep paying, forever. David's sitting in his workshop right now. It's 2 a.m. Claire just turned 2. Melissa's talking about having another baby. The business is worth tens of millions. His shoes are worn by presidents and celebrities and royalty. And tonight, like every month for the past 8 years, someone's going to knock on his workshop door. Someone desperate. Someone disposable. Someone who made the mistake of trusting a successful shoemaker who offered them money for a simple job. The elves are already here. David can hear them in the walls, sharpening their blades, preparing their tools, laughing about what they're going to create tonight. And David's going to open that door, going to smile, going to lead another person to slaughter, because that's the deal. That's the price. That's what it costs to matter in a world that measures worth in dollars and Instagram followers and magazine covers. The fairy tale lied. The elves don't help shoemakers out of kindness. They help because they're hungry. And humans are so desperate to succeed that they'll feed anything, sacrifice anyone, become anything. David learned that lesson, lives it every day. And someday, when Claire's old enough, when she inherits the shop like he inherited it from Grandpa, she'll find his journal. She'll read his instructions. She'll see the list of names, hundreds of names by then, probably, and she'll have a choice. Burn it all down and walk away poor, or summon the elves and learn to hunt. David knows which choice she'll make. It's genetic, probably. The willingness to sacrifice others for personal gain, the ability to compartmentalize, the talent for justifying atrocities in the name of success. She'll summon them. She'll make her first deal, and she'll tell herself it's temporary, that she'll stop after paying the initial debt, that she's different from her father and grandfather. And she'll be wrong, because the elves are patient. They've been collecting for 200 years. They'll collect for 200 more. And there will always be desperate shoemakers willing to trade human lives for perfect craftsmanship. Always. That's David's story. That's what happens when you make deals with things that aren't human. When you trade morality for success. When you convince yourself that some people's lives matter less than your comfort. If this story made you uncomfortable, made you question what you'd be willing to do for success, hit that subscribe button. We've got more tales about the prices we pay for our ambitions, the lines we cross when we're desperate, and the monsters we become when we stop seeing other humans as people. Drop a comment and tell us, what would you sacrifice for guaranteed success? Where's your line? Or better yet, tell us which fairy tale you want us to darken next. What childhood story do you want to see twisted into nightmare fuel? Because here at Sinister Stories, we know the truth about fairy tales. They weren't written to make you feel safe. They were written as warnings, instructions for survival, reminders that every deal has a price and every gift has strings. The elves don't make shoes out of kindness. They make them out of hunger, and that hunger never stops. It just finds new shoemakers, new workshops, new people desperate enough to summon them. Subscribe, comment, and whatever you do, if you inherit a family business with a dark history, if you find a journal with warnings written in shaking handwriting, if you discover a ritual that promises to solve all your problems, burn it, walk away, stay poor and desperate and human, because success built on suffering isn't success. It's just a different kind of slavery, and the elves are always watching, always waiting, always hungry for the next desperate shoemaker who thinks they're special enough to beat the deal. They're not. Nobody ever is.